Hello everyone, and welcome to today's workshop or today's video if you are watching us on YouTube or on social media or on any other platform. So today we're going to talk about a very important and critical topic, which is business continuity, which is business recovery in case of a disaster. So this is a very important topic, but so neglected by many companies and businesses around the world. And many business owners don't know how to answer this very simple question. What would you do if ever an emergency happens to your company, whether it's a pandemic or a natural disaster or a security breach? What would you do? What your team would do? So many business owners don't know actually how to answer this question. And today I have with me my guest, Derek Dawson. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Ines. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. So today we have Derek Dawson with us today here to talk about this topic. So Derek is actually the managing director of D&D Technology Services. And he has something like 15 years of experience in information technology services. I know that you took part in many projects and initiatives in cybersecurity, business continuity, and business recovery, also disaster recovery. Is that correct, Derek?
That is correct, yes. So throughout my career, my background is mostly in the financial services or banking sector. And through that, in that area, there are lots of regulations, a huge regulatory environment. So you have to have emergency planning or disaster planning if you're an organization in the financial services industry. But not only there, you know, a lot of other industries also have to have the disaster planning or emergency planning. So yes, and doing technology projects, everything from setting up networks, wireless and wired, to deploying applications, mobile applications, online applications, you name it. So
thank you for completing the presentation. I know there's so much more to say about you. So I'll leave the floor to you. We'll have maybe a presentation of 30 minutes or 35, you decide, or 40 minutes. It's up to you. And then I'll go back with the attendees' questions and we'll try to answer as many as we can, okay? So sure. The floor is yours. Thank you again, Derek. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ines. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. As Ines said, we're going to talk about business continuity and disaster recovery, which is a very broad topic. Excuse me 1 second here. Okay, so yeah, sorry about that. I had a little technical difficulties there. It would not. Okay, let's hope that pops up. So everybody should be seeing just the beginning of the presentation here. I have a few slides for you to view. So yeah, so we're talking about what we call emergency preparedness or disaster preparedness. That's a generic term for it. And we'll actually go into more detail on the more correct term that we should be using for that. I'm just going to give you a definition. This comes from the World Health Organization. So it says, emergency preparedness encompasses the planning and response to disasters. A disaster is defined by the World Health Organization as a sudden phenomenon of sufficient magnitude to overwhelm the resources of a hospital, region, or location requiring external support. A disaster can be natural occurrence, like an earthquake, or a malicious act like a cyber attack. So I hope everybody understood that. That's pretty straightforward. We're not really concentrating on an emergency per se. So let's say you're in your workplace, one of your coworkers or colleagues becomes sick. You have to call emergency services to take that coworker away to get medical care. So even though that is an emergency, we are more talking about the type of emergency, or as the proper term, disaster, that affects the organization. It affects the functions of the organization. So let's say, for instance, it's affecting your computer systems. or the building that you meet at. That's what we're actually concentrating on, something that's actually more widespread in the organization. So basically, with disaster recovery, there are lots of things out there that can cause a disaster. There's lots of threats out there. So, for example, a disaster can be man-made. For example, acts of God can be natural or man-made. For example, acts of God, sabotage, or human error, etc. Well, going further, these are some examples of disaster, of disasters. For instance, earthquakes, fires, floods, terrorist attacks, cyber attacks, power outages, etc. Computer system failures, pandemics. So as you can see, as I showed you there, all those things are not mutually exclusive to just either being natural disasters or man-made. For example, you can have fires. Fires can be natural. You can have fire seasons. We are here in Los Angeles or in the state of California in the United States. And in California, you sometimes get what they call wildfires, which I'm sure that happens in a lot of other places around the world also. And so, for example, you could have a wildfire that threatens your organization, the business where you are, your location, your facility, or you can have an actual fire in that facility that may be through accidents, for example, an electrical issue, or you may have a fire that happens because sabotage, there's arson, so someone can actually set that fire. So what we're talking about here is, disasters or emergency that can actually cripple your business, and they come in all levels of threats, like we said, from natural to man-made, and from big to small, depending on the size of your organization. But no matter if your business is large or small, you will at some point come across a disaster that will be something that will hinder your business functions. So let's continue to move forward. And so we talked about pandemics. That was on the last slide there. So of course, everyone, I'm sure, is aware of this. We're currently in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, which is the coronavirus, or the appropriate name is COVID-19. I believe that's coronavirus disease 2019. And so these are just some numbers, from Johns Hopkins. They're all rounded up, but I'm sure we'll reach these numbers pretty soon. And we have about almost 4 million infected worldwide. We also have almost 300,000 have died worldwide, and those numbers keep climbing, and they're climbing day by day, of course, globally. Economies across the world are at a standstill. So basically, they're at a standstill because we are having what we call quarantines, or here in the United States, we're having what we call stay-at-home orders. And those things inhibit certain functions that we're used to doing. So for instance, normally before COVID-19, we were used to just getting up, going to work, going into an office, sitting in an office in a cubicle, maybe side by side with your coworkers and colleagues. And that wasn't an issue. I mean, someone might have a cold, someone might have the flu, and they're still coming to work. But because of the deadly nature of COVID-19, that's not really an option. And it's highly infectious nature. It's much more infectious than the normal flu and also a common cold. So it's something that governments across the world have had to go to extraordinary means to combat this virus by having these stay-at-home orders or quarantines or different things like that. The other thing is the world is facing a health and economic crisis at the same time. So this is a crisis of epic proportion. I mean, governments are having to infuse stimulus into their environments. They're having to give money away. Here in the United States, our Congress has passed what they call stimulus bills, and they have different phases of it to make sure that both citizens and businesses are able to function during this crisis. So this is a major thing. I mean, I'm sure all of you can agree with that. It's something that can really cripple your business, or at the very least, hinder it in a major way. So, like we mentioned, because of COVID-19, a lot of businesses had to do things that they probably weren't used to doing. A lot of businesses had to maybe have a majority of their employees work from home. And that is something that maybe some businesses were set up properly for that, but then some weren't. But then with that also comes the risk of working from home, of cyber risks. So you have cyber attacks. Now, what's going on out there in the cyber world, because I also have studied cybersecurity and information security in that realm for many years. The bad guys are actually salivating right now. They love this because they know that there are lots of weaknesses out there in many organizations and in many companies. Because many companies were not prepared to have a full-blown telecommute system to have all their employees working from home. So let's go over some of the issues there that are rising. So, for instance, employees are working from home. You know, are they using a company-issued laptop or a company-issued machine that's only used for that specific purpose? Or are they using their own home machine, or are they using what they call a bring-your-own device, something that's being used for other functions? The problem with that is when it's not used specifically for just the function of working at your business, is someone can introduce you to malicious activity by downloading software that's unsafe on that particular laptop or notebook or whatever else they're using, device that they're using to connect to the office. So that gives another layer of insecurity, and for the bad guys to actually access your network at work because of all these now amounts of remote connections coming into the network. Another thing too is, are the connections that they're connecting to, are those secure? I mean, even though they may be using a VPN or they may be using other things, there's still other ways of being able to gain access. For instance, is the connection at home safe? Is it properly locked down? Is there a firewall on that end? Are people within the household or wherever they're logging in from, are they actually online playing video games, doing things that can open up the connection to risk? Also, are they using what they call IoT devices, so things that maybe have very low security? For example, refrigerators that connect online, TVs that connect on what they call smart devices. Those things can all be at risk, can open up loopholes into your personal home network. For example, I don't know if any of you have seen this. They've shown where people are able to view people's cameras all the way from Russia, for instance, because people don't change their default passwords, or their devices are so easy to hack into. Their Ring doorbell cameras or these kind of things are so easy to hack into that it's not a problem for the bad guys to access. So that's the other layer that's happened. So one unintended consequences of having everybody work from home because of the virus is that now it's caused an environment that's more preferable for cyber attacks because of all the remote connections coming in. So how do we deal with this? I mean, how do we try to mitigate these problems? How do we plan for these things? So just to show you what's coming from an expert, organizations of all kinds are facing an uptick in email-based threats, endpoint security gaps, and other problems as a result of the sudden switch to a fully remote workforce, says William Altman, senior analyst at the Global Cyber Center of New York City. And just to go over some statistics on data breaches. Data breaches exposed 4.1 billion records in the first half of 2019. Okay, so if you look at that 4.1 billion records, that is a staggering number. I believe the world population is less than 8 billion right now. So a record can be anything, but you're talking about almost about half or a little bit more than half of the people that are currently on Earth. So that's a staggering number. And those numbers keep on going up because of the lack of security, the vulnerabilities that are out there, and how so many people and businesses are unaware of the particular risks that are out there. Look at this, 71% of breaches were financially motivated, and 25% were motivated by espionage. So we can tell that we have a lot of, for instance, credit card theft. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have experienced their credit card being stolen, being used, at certain places, and then you have to go and cancel the card and have it reissued and go through the issues with your credit card company, your bank. I had an experience where I was on my way to Las Vegas, and I happened to use my debit card, which was a very unusual thing because I don't use my debit card at gas stations or ATMs unless it's an ATM that belongs to the particular bank that I use. And I also make sure that it's one that's inside, so it's not susceptible to what they call skimmers. And so I was in a rush. I was behind trying to get a lot of things done, and happened to use it at a gas station that I normally use, but never say things. So happened is when I was leaving, I left on vacation. When I was coming back, having breakfast, I saw that someone had actually stolen my information, used my card, took thousands of dollars out of my account. But this is a very real problem. Your information can show up on the dark web, and they use it within a matter of minutes. So it's a very pervasive problem that we have to deal with. 62% of businesses experienced phishing and social engineering attacks in 2018. So that's another thing that the bad guys are exploiting right now. They are using phishing attacks, where they may send out a particular email, and they may ask for certain information. The email may look like a legitimate email from, let's say, someone in your organization. And from that, they may ask you to disclose certain information, maybe a password, maybe a username, or some information that will help them reach the system. So these are things that they do, and unfortunately, a lot of people fall for it. So these are the things we want to plan for. And social engineering, also another type of attack where they may call someone in your organization to get information. So there are all these things out there that are arising just before, but also they're even more intense because of COVID-19 and because of the propagation of people working from home. So what can we do? So is there a way for businesses or organizations to prepare for these types of threats? And the answer is yes, by planning. So whatever you call it, some people say a emergency business plan, a business emergency plan, a disaster plan, you name it, a disaster program, an emergency program, all these things. And some of these things are also, and these type of plans aren't to replace other things that you may have internally, like you may have a cyber program or a cyber policy or a information security program or policy. These are not to replace it. These things are to complement it. But why the emergency business plan or disaster preparedness plan, whatever you want to call it, is so important is because it allows you to look forward to things like COVID-19. This won't be the only pandemic that we're going to deal with. I'm sure in the future there will be others. You want to be prepared. I mean, back in 2009, there was swine flu. Before that, there was bird flu. This has happened to be a much greater threat, and you have to prepare for these things. Not alone just normal disasters, earthquakes. We mentioned fires, floods, hurricanes, you name it. There's all these things that can happen that can hinder your business, from its operation. So let's look into more of the details on this. So the correct term is what we call is business continuity. Business continuity is an organization's ability to maintain essential functions during and after a disaster has occurred. Business continuity planning establishes risk management processes and procedures that aim to prevent interruptions to mission-critical services and reestablish full functions to the organization as quickly and as smoothly as possible. So, as you can see, it's basically being prepared with policies, procedures, and plans in place to make sure your business can operate in the case a COVID-19 happens, or a coronavirus happens, pandemic happens, an earthquake happens, or a cyber attack happens. A cyber attack can be very deadly. I mean, I've dealt with this before in the past. Malicious software can be downloaded into your network. And what it's designed to do is propagate throughout your network. So for example, I'll give you one of ransomware. That's a big thing that was happening a few years ago, and it's still actually happening, where ransomware is someone will download a malicious program, either through email, by clicking on an email link, or just downloading something. And that program will actually look on your network or on your PC or devices for information, and it will hold that information and lock it up until you pay a ransom to the maker of that malicious software. So a lot of organizations have been caught by this because they're unable to function because they may not have backups, they may not have any other way of accessing that information. It's a very big deal. So it's so many threats out there, and what business continuity will allow you to do is think about these threats, and in conjunction with other policies and procedures, like I said, other information security programs, policies, cyber policies, and things like that, it will allow you to plan for these things and be ready when these things happen. Disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is an area of security planning that aims to protect an organization from the effects of significant negative events. Having a disaster recovery strategy in place enables an organization to maintain or quickly resume mission-critical functions following a disruption. So disaster recovery more focuses on your systems. So if you're an organization, maybe mostly medium-sized, larger, but small too, small organizations cannot dismiss this. You want to make sure that you have backups or able to recover your data, and that's what mostly disaster recovery focuses on. So they both go hand in hand together. Let's move on. So we're nearing the end here, but I just wanted to go over. So I hear a lot of questions from people, especially smaller organizations. But here are some of the things like I get, or some of the pushback or things. Creating a plan is too time consuming. Now, that can be true. It can be, depending on the size of your organization and the scope of what you do, it can be time consuming because you have to account for different disasters that can occur in your organization. It's basically risk mitigation, and you're preparing for these problems. But think of it if a disaster happens and you're unprepared. Think about how much time you'll have to take to rebuild your systems, to make sure you can communicate with your employees, instead of taking the time out when the disaster hasn't occurred, so that you are prepared, so things run much more smoothly. So that counts for both organizations, big and small. Another one I get is creating a plan is too expensive. A little thing that I should have, a little typo there. And it can be expensive depending on how prepared you want to be, or it can be inexpensive if you just want to put certain things in place. Now, the more thorough you are, of course, the more prepared you're going to be, and the more likely you're going to be better off if a COVID-19 comes down the way and it threatens your business. If a major disaster like an earthquake happens and all your locations are destroyed, if a major cyber attack happens and all your systems are corrupted or infected. So it can be expensive depending on how far you want to go with it, but it doesn't mean it has to be expensive. It just depends on how far you want to go and what's needed for an organization your size. I've heard things, for instance, like all my data is in the cloud. So a lot of small businesses will say this to me, small, and I just use the cloud and it's not necessary. But a lot of small businesses also, if you're using your data in the cloud, you're probably also reliant on cloud applications. And that means that you have to have a connection up all the time on the internet. So if something is not local, then you have to make sure that you can always connect to those apps. Those apps are critical to your business. My business is simple. That's another one I get. A lot of small businesses say this. And it may be simple, but it does not mean that you don't have to prepare for a particular disaster or event. Even though it's simple, it does not mean that you won't lose internet connection. Where you cannot access your cloud folders, where you can't actually access your data. Or a lot of people say, oh, I can just go to Starbucks. I can just go to the library. That's not really the case. This pandemic has showed us that if a place is closed that you're normally used to going to, how are you going to do business? If there is no Starbucks and you can't sit down in Starbucks, or use the library or another location, you have to have that connection at home or some kind of backup connection so that you can be able to access that information. So there's a slew of other things, but those are just some of the things that can happen even though you think your business is simple or that all your information is in the cloud. I can work from anywhere. I said that may be true, but like I mentioned before, if you don't have that option because of closures, quarantines, things like that, then that is not going to be an option for you, and you have to have a secondary option. I don't have any employees, so a lot of small businesses that may be one person, very low overhead, they say, yeah, I don't have any employees, so why do I have to worry? Now, you may not have any employees, but you do have processes, you do have procedures, you do have third parties that you work with, and you have to make sure that those third parties are going to be there and they have contingencies that if something happens. For instance, it doesn't even have to be a pandemic. It could just be somebody going out of business, for example, somebody that you're dependent on heavily in your business. So these are the things that you have to look at. I'm just giving you some of the common pushbacks that I get. But as you can see, it don't matter your size, whether you're a very small from one person or a very large corporation, multinational, you still have to think about these things. You could have a small plan where maybe you're 2 to 5 pages, just your main basic things, and you start to grow on it if you're a small business, or you can have multiple pages, hundreds of pages if you're a large organization. It just depends on the scope and how far you want to go and how far you want to mitigate your risks. So that pretty much concludes it. What I want to do is just leave my information here. As I said before, this is a very broad topic. I tried to get a high-level overview, and if anybody has any questions, I'm pretty much open to any questions. You can email me either at the main email that we have for our for the company for D&D Technology Services. That's the inquiry that my employees can go into and check your messages, or you can email me directly. It's our website. We're actually doing some changes to the website, so it won't be live until the 11th. And then directly you can call through 1-424-270-3631. So that's inside and outside the United States. So if there are any questions, I'm open to any questions that anybody has.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Derek. That was so informative. I actually want to go back to one number I kept in mind. This is the 4.1 billion records. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, well, that's the number from a company called, I believe, Risk-Based. And
wow.
Records, like I said, records can be anything. Records can be an email record. It could be a name.
All right.
But more than likely, it's a combination of records, right? So more than likely, they've reached something, and then they have the name, they may have the address, they may have the email, they may have a driver's license number, they may have a social security number, those things. So those are the worst. Yeah, those are the worst.
Information. Yeah. Right. And these are the ones that we know about, but maybe the number is bigger, right?
I think the number is much larger because a lot of things don't get reported. A lot of companies don't report things, or a lot of individuals don't report things. Right. So I think that it's just like how we don't have the full extent of what the COVID-19 numbers are, right? We all agree with that. We haven't done
Not
enough
yet.
testing. Yeah, we haven't done enough testing here in the United States or around the world. So I'm sure the numbers are much larger. The same thing with this. So it's much larger, and the thing is to protect yourself and be knowledgeable about what's going on.
Absolutely. We have like many questions, but we have one question that really takes us back to one of the misconceptions that you were talking about, like having a recovery plan is expensive. You talked about that in your presentation. And then we have someone who says that he is a CPA actually. He says, what is the minimum budget for a small business to create a disaster recovery plan? Yes, and we have other questions. I'll ask you the others just after answering this one.
So I wouldn't say there's any minimum budget. Like what I didn't mention, I wouldn't say there's a minimum budget. What I'd like to do is offer everybody who is in this webinar right now is a 45-minute consulting free of charge. And what it may do for you, what it will do for you is you can actually see where you currently stand. You may not have to spend a lot of money at all. You may just have to spend the time just creating a plan yourself, concentrating on all the things that you think that are risky to you, and then make sure that you keep track of those things. For instance, make a list of all the vendors that you use to make sure that those people will be around in case of a disaster so that you can operate your business. You know, for instance, where are you working from? Are you working from a shared space? You have your own office, you have your home office, stuff like that. So what I will welcome is, with the information I had on there, anybody can call, they can email. And what I'll do is give you that free session and we can talk about it. And I also have a questionnaire that I will give you out, and that will help you see where you currently stand. And then if it goes further than that, if you're unable to do it yourself, then we can talk about,
thank you.
Budgeting and things like that there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the consultation. That's so awesome. So everyone, we're going to share Derek's email and professional phone number. Feel free to ask him. I'll go back to him, send him an email. Even people who are watching us through YouTube or other social media, please feel free to send emails. He will find a way to answer you, help you, or maybe schedule a call, right? Thank you very much for this, Derek. Thank you. So I have another question here. Somebody's saying, again, we go back to the Zoom thing, to the working from home thing. So he is saying, is it safe nowadays to have our business meetings using Zoom? Is it safe? And if not, what is the alternative?
Well, it depends on what type of business meeting you're having on Zoom, right? So right now, this actual webinar is over Zoom. We're not doing anything that is sensitive, right? This is open. This is information. So I wouldn't care if even the bad guys are logged in. I mean, it's okay if they know who I am, because they know that I'm out there trying to thwart them. But if you're discussing sensitive things to your organization, trade secrets, sensitive information as far as employee information about clients, customers, you don't want to do that over Zoom.
Okay.
And I'm going to be blunt with you, because Zoom is not an encrypted source. It's not where you have end-to-end encryption. Now, very few are where you're able to have this many participants in there. For instance, they have WhatsApp that has some level of encryption, but it's still using a cloud-based system where the company is able to track a lot of what you're doing. The most secure system I've seen out there is what they call a system called Signal. Now, Signal is an end-to-end encryption. They don't store any information on their cloud servers, which I'm very big on that. I don't like information being stored on a company. A lot of people put too much trust in Google. They put too much trust in Facebook. And you should not do that. I mean, they're storing your information as we see. They can sell your information. So Signal does not do that. It keeps certain metadata, but the data is not anything that can be traced back to you. The only downside with Signal is that it's only a person-to-person. They do not have a function where it can be a group chat yet. So we can talk about that further. I can send some more information out on on the upside and downsides of all of those, because we'd be here for a little while talking about that. But that's an idea. That's my preference, is Signal when I'm doing person-to-person communications. And if you have to use Zoom, make sure you're updating to the most recent version, where you can at least use a password, and don't do personal information over it. You know, like I said, sensitive things like that, trade secrets.
Yeah. Thank you for sending over the links. If you could send them my way, I will make sure that we share them with people who are attending this webinar, and share them also on YouTube and other platforms. So yes, so we have a couple of other questions and suggestions also. So someone is asking, it's always mostly about small business owners. So he says, like, I am a small business owner, and where should I start? Like, he's convinced, he thinks that he needs this recovery plan, but where should I start? Because there are so many other things. I completely understand him. So many things that you need to look over.
Yeah. So what I can do is, you can take advantage of that consulting session that I have, because it'd be kind of hard to say that, because it's kind of hard to say where you can start without knowing more about what your business is. I don't know whether you're in the financial services, whether you're a retailer. It's different for every business, because if you're in the medical field, for instance, if you're a doctor's office, there's certain things called HIPAA compliance that you have to do. The same thing in financial services, where I came from. Lots of regulations. So I need to know where you're coming from, and then I can say, well, this is where you should start from, and then you can take it from there, or we can continue the discussion on. Makes sense. Let's take advantage of that consulting session.
Okay, sure. We'll share the information with everyone. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Derek, that you want to share with our attendees or people who are going to watch us over YouTube. Any final thoughts, any advice that you want to give to business owners, in this, especially in the crisis that we're going through?
Sure. So my thought would be is to start doing something, right? You can do it in phases. You may not have the time or the resources to do everything all at once, but start doing something. Even if you're taking a Word document and starting on your own and putting down, what do you think the biggest threats are to my business? What are the things I need to worry about? Just making a list of those things is where you need to start. And then you can gradually improve upon it. Of course, it'd be in the perfect situation, everybody would be prepared and have all the resources, but I know that's not the case. It's small businesses out there. There's different priorities out there, but at least get started. Like I said, you can do things in tiers. Take one step at a time. Say, maybe this quarter I'm going to do this. This quarter I'm going to make this milestone, until eventually you're putting aside a little budget to where you're able to do something, till eventually somewhere down the line it's built. But as you can see, things happen when it's least expected. I'm sure if any of us would have had a conversation, we would not have said we would be in quarantine or stay-at-home order in starting in March of 2020 to now in May of 2020. I doubt any of us would have foreseen that. So you cannot say it's not going to happen. It's going to catch you off guard. And what I've learned from experience dealing with this for many years is that anything can happen. Be aware of what's in your environment, the resources, what type of disasters you have to deal with, whether it's earthquakes, power outages, whatever it is, because those things can destroy a business, and you just want to be prepared for that, and just be prepared for yourself, at home. You also want to be safe at home also, and make sure the family is safe, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you. We'll make sure to share your email address and professional phone number with everyone who's interested in starting, at least thinking about that and knowing where they are going to start from. Thank you very much. It was really informative, and hope to see you soon, guys. If you need any help, please make sure you take a look at Derek's email address, and I'm sure he's going to answer all of you and help you go through that. Thank you again. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for everyone who attended this workshop, and for everyone who's going to watch this video. Take care, everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.